Every one of us has someone in our life whose story ended too soon. A parent, a sibling, a friend, someone taken by cancer, often quietly, suddenly.
Lung cancer is a great example. It's the deadliest cancer killer. 1 in 5 cancer deaths is from lung cancer. It takes more lives than the combination of breast cancer and cervical cancer. If you combine all three of those, lung cancer takes more lives a year.
But what if that could change? What if a simple blood test, just a while, no scans, no symptoms, could spot cancer before it ever takes hold? What if that test wasn't for a select few, but for everyone?
Getting a blood-based test, anywhere that you can draw blood and where that blood can be shipped off to our lab, you get this test done. And so I think it's the great democratizer. It really democratizes access to cutting-edge, life-saving testing. And I truly believe that's a human right. I mean, why should some people who have access be able to detect cancer at stage 1, whereas everyone else is kind of relegated to late-stage diagnosis? That doesn't seem right to me.
What's something that you've learned about leadership in biotech that no MBA or boardroom could have prepared you for?
I think biotech is a particularly rewarding and also particularly challenging place to be a leader. That trade-off, I would always choose going for the really hard thing that is incredibly rewarding. I can't imagine a mission that would be more compelling than finding cancer early, where patients have much better outcomes.
Today's conversation isn't just about diagnostics. It's about hope. It's about technology that doesn't just detect disease, but gives us back time. And it's about one leader's mission to make that future real. My guest today is Susan Tousi, CEO of Delphi Diagnostics, and a woman who has spent her career turning complex science into accessible solutions for people around the world. If you simply want to understand what the future of cancer detection might really look like, this is a conversation you'll want to sit with. Susan, welcome to Drug Diaries. Before we jump into today's episode, I just want to say something from the heart. Over 93% of the people who watch this podcast regularly haven't subscribed. And listen, I get it. Life is busy. You click, you watch, you move on. But if you've ever felt like this show brings you value, if it has made you think, sparked a new idea, introduced you to something inspiring, then I have a small favor to ask. Please hit that subscribe button. It might not seem like much, but to me, it means everything. This podcast has always been a labor of love. No sponsors, no script, just honest conversations with people trying to make a difference in the world of healthcare. And your support, your one click, helps me keep doing that. It helps more people discover these voices. It helps this community grow. So if you're here, if you believe in this, please consider subscribing. Thank you for being here. Now let's get into the episode. Every one of us has someone in our life whose story ended too soon. A parent, a sibling, a friend, someone taken by cancer, often quietly, suddenly. And for most of us, the painful truth is, by the time it's detected, it's already too late. But what if that could change? What if a simple blood test, just a while, no scans, no symptoms, could spot cancer before it ever takes hold? What if that test wasn't for a select few, but for everyone? Today's conversation isn't just about diagnostics. It's about hope. It's about technology that doesn't just detect disease, but gives us back time. And it's about one leader's mission to make that future real. My guest today is Susan Tousi, CEO of Delphi Diagnostics, and a woman who has spent her career turning complex science into accessible solutions for people around the world. Before Delphi, she was Chief Commercial Officer at Illumina, where she helped make genomic sequencing a global standard. Now she's leading a company at the forefront of fragmentomics, a revolutionary approach that reads cancer's invisible clues from DNA fragments in the blood. But this conversation isn't just about biotech. It's about leadership, legacy, and the personal courage it takes to lead through ambiguity, risk, and deep responsibility. If you've ever lost someone too soon, if you have ever wondered whether science can actually outpace suffering, or if you simply want to understand what the future of cancer detection might really look like, this is a conversation you'll want to sit with. Susan, welcome to Drug Diaries.
Thank you, Kasha. It's such a pleasure to be here and can't wait to dive in.
Likewise, I'm so pleased to have you on Drug Diaries today. Susan, you've led major commercial and scientific shifts at Illumina and now at Delphi. But before all of that, what's the story behind your ambition? What did the younger version of you dream of becoming?
Well, it's fun to think about what was my dream when I was deciding what I would study and where I would go to school. And I have to say that my view was that the world is changing and I wanted to be part of that and I wanted to make a difference. And I remember thinking that even at an early age. And I wasn't really aware of the technologies of the future and kind of where engineering was going, but I had a math and a physics teacher who really inspired me to think about engineering. There weren't too many women who were pursuing that career path. And the way they got me excited about it was that they said that engineers and technology are going to change society. They're going to improve people's lives. They're going to improve communities. They're going to make the world a better place. And you need to be part of that. You have the skills. You have the passion. And it wasn't until then that I really thought about, technology actually changing the world, making it a better place. So I set off and studied engineering. I'm an engineer at heart. I like to kind of problem solve and fix things and think about pushing the envelope of technology to do something we've never imagined could be done before. And after my studies, I joined HP, which was a company that was on the forefront of the innovation. I spent a decade there working on printing and imaging technologies, bringing new capabilities into consumers' hands that they could never imagine before. Being able to print photographic quality images, sharing data at a scale never done before, sharing memories, and after that, I did a stint at a startup, which was a joint venture between HP and Kodak. And then I landed at Kodak, where I led the digital printing, revolution that was happening. Kodak wanted to be part of that, and I led that for about 8 years. So that was my kind of early career journey, and set me off on really technology being part of my future.
That's an incredible transition from engineering to life science and biotechnology. Very inspiring. Susan, in a world where people are constantly searching for meaning in their work, how did you know that this early cancer detection healthcare transformation was your calling?
Yeah, and that brings me to the part of the story. I covered kind of the part of the story where I was really driven by technology. What was the next step in my career and really kind of led to the path of dreaming about early cancer detection being accessible was when I was introduced to what was going on in life sciences. And I failed to mention that although I studied engineering and really drove, kind of how is technology a revolution. I come from a long line of medical doctors. My father was a doctor, cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone,
Wow.
was surgeons, physicians, and I was always inspired by doing something that would help people at the very core and what could be more important than helping them with their healthy lifespan. But, I felt that medicine was moving pretty slowly compared to the internet and compared to kinda consumer technology and compared to big data. Medicine just seemed to move at a snail's pace. And, point in my career where I'd done everything I thought was exciting in the world of, technology, I was introduced to the changes in life sciences and genomics, and I met some of the people who founded Illumina. I met the CEO of Illumina. He showed me his genome on an iPad and talked about this insight into one's, very fundamental, one's core genome, one's core biology would be the revolution in medicine. And I got very excited about that because I knew like revolutions and I knew how to bring technology to big problems. And here was an opportunity where medicine was actually going to benefit from I spent the next 12 years at Illumina. I came in as heading product development and led the development of all the platforms and the core technologies driving genomic sequencing from dollars a test or $100,000 a genome to closer to $100. And so, in my view, it was, boy, this is interesting, expensive, kind of niche technology. How do we get this to being at a price point and at ease of use that it could actually make a difference in everyone's lives. And that's what we did. We did that, over the course of 9 years as leading product development, then 3 years as the chief commercial officer of the company. And what inspired me most there was the applications that were leading to diagnosing disease and diagnosing disease early, and really the inspiration of being able to detect cancer at a stage where patients have choices. They have much higher
Mm.
survival rates, where it's not so invasive, where it's not a death sentence, but just a disease that you deal with. And so that was the most inspiring thing that
Right.
I could think about doing, and that's what led me to early cancer detection really being part of my life. I think from here on out.
Right. And one of the most heartbreaking truths in oncology is this: nearly 60% of cancers in the US are still diagnosed at stage 3 or 4. When treatment is harder, options are fewer, and the outcomes are worse, it means thousands of lives each year could have been different if only we had caught it sooner. And we hear the word cancer and it evokes so many emotions: fear, urgency, helplessness. But from your perspective, how do you think people misunderstand what early detection really means?
Yeah, I think, people don't see that cancer can be detected at stage one with high sensitivity, and that it can be done routinely. It just becomes part of, just like our cholesterol is checked, and, our other kind of biometrics are checked once a year in a, standard kind of primary care visit. So can our status in terms of cancer existing in our body at its earliest stages, where it can be surgically removed, it can be treated to complete remission and maybe cured. And I think that is the experience with cancer that most people don't have. The experience is typically, as you say, where it's found late. And now we're
Mm.
talking about, let's put you on a therapy regime and maybe get you in clinical trials. And like, let's hope that, we can save your life. When it's found at stage one, and, our first focus has been lung cancer. Lung cancer is a great example. It's the deadliest cancer killer. 1 in 5 cancer deaths is from lung cancer. It takes more lives than the combination of colorectal, breast cancer, and cervical cancer. If you combine all three of those, lung
Mm.
cancer takes more lives a year. And yet, screening doesn't happen for lung cancer. The only way to get screened is through a low dose CT scan or CAT scan. And less than 6% of people should actually get that done. When lung cancer is found late, and that's typically what happens, very poor prognosis. When it's found in early stage, the 10-year survival rate is 73%. So it's a survivable cancer. And this is, I think that is the misconception that people have, that, cancer is a death sentence. Cancer can be found early. Cancer can be absolutely survivable.
And Susan, can you explain in the simplest terms how a blood test can now detect cancer? What makes Delphi's approach so different and so powerful?
Yeah, well, the truth is that a cancer, as it's growing, a tumor as it's growing in your body, is shedding off cells, and those, cells, this free floating kind of cell free DNA, we call it, uh, is available in your bloodstream. So by actually just taking a blood test, and by collecting all the cell-free DNA, in our case, we sequence the entirety of the cell-free DNA from a simple blood draw, one blood draw. And, we extract the plasma, and from that, we extract the cell-free DNA. We sequence the entirety of it, and there are signals there that are completely correlated with the presence of cancer. And there are two things have happened. One is genomic sequencing has come down in cost and
Mm.
improved in quality to the point where we can use genomic sequencing to look at the cell-free DNA. The second thing is big data and AI and machine learning as a tool, because by sequencing, doing whole genome sequencing on this cell-free DNA, we generate a tremendous amount of data, and we have to derive the signal from that data. And it's, through this machine learning and AI that we're able to derive a very high sensitivity signal. Our sensitivity at stage one is in the mid Cs, which is really high. Stage one, there's just not that much disease present in the bloodstream. But that's been through the power of from data, power of our AI algorithms that allowed us to do that. So that's kind of how it works. And if people weren't thinking that to get early stage testing, you don't have to go to a big imaging center or have a, academic cancer center, the medical center near you, it can just be as simple as a draw of blood. I think they would get it done. And importantly, we've had the true mission that we want this available to everyone. This can be a niche test that costs so much that only the
Mm.
very fortunate are able to access it. This has to be at a cost structure and availability that anywhere you can get your blood drawn, patients can get access to this for very low cost or really kind of no copay and no cost. And that's been kind of what's driven us.
Right. And what's the percent of accuracy we have seen in clinical trials so far? Is it 100% accurate?
Yeah. So the way our test works is that, as I mentioned, you would get your blood drawn for our first test, which is for lung cancer. It's for people who have a smoking history. If you have a smoking history, your primary care physician is flagged during the normal course of your routine, exam to offer you the test. If the test is negative, then 99.8% chance that you don't have cancer. You can check the box, come back next year. You can be pretty sure that you don't have, you and your physician can be pretty sure you don't have cancer. If it's positive, then you're more than 5 times more likely to actually find cancer in a scan. And then from there, the next step would be that if you're in this kind of high risk, then you go get a scan. Hopefully, then, as I mentioned, the test detects the earliest stages of cancer. Uh, Routinely, it will be found early when patient has options, and the survivability of lung cancer when found early is very high, 73% 10-year survival, as I mentioned. So that's how it works, and that's how it's working with our first health system partners today in practice.
Right. And one of the things I found fascinating is how tumor DNA fragments can leave pattern in the blood. What's the story behind how this discovery came to life?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because actually the history goes all the way back to the non-invasive prenatal testing, where we were looking for the cell-free DNA from a baby in the mother's bloodstream. So, if you're pregnant, you can get a test at about 10 weeks of pregnancy to determine the health of the baby. Well, in a few cases, this test led to an abnormal finding. It looked like the baby, had many kind of kind of an abnormal growth behavior. And when looked more closely, it seemed the baby was fine. And what it was this was cell-free DNA from a tumor, not from a baby, and kind of led to the discovery that this could be applied to finding cancer early. These patterns are, what the cell replication process in cancer is completely thrown off. And because of, the chaotic nature of cancer, you get these massive like disruptions in the genome architecture, and you get amplifications, deletions, chromosome arms that are either added or lost. You get this hugely mutated version that now is kind of replicated and being kind of shed off into the bloodstream. So these patterns, when enough cancer cells are studied, these patterns become very recognizable. And because we sequence the entire cell-free DNA, we look across all chromosomes of this cell-free universe of cell-free DNA, and these patterns become very clear and they become detectable with high accuracy and high sensitivity, and that's how we've developed our algorithms.
What strikes me is that in many communities, people don't lack the will to get screened. They lack the infrastructure. They lack trust, information, or even a nearby clinic. So when we talk about innovation, we also have to ask, who are we leaving out? And how do we fix that? You've said early detection is a human right, not a privilege. But access to care is still a massive problem. How do we make sure this science isn't just for few, but for everyone?
Yeah, and that's what really draws me to blood-based testing being a solution because just take low dose CT scanning. May not be accessible for you. It's one of the reasons why it's not getting done. Why less than 6% of people who should be getting screened get screened. You may not be it may not be available to you. Scheduling might be a difficulty. You might be months
Mm.
out, you have to take a day off work. Not everyone can access something that requires a more invasive or more kind of planned and for early detection, the capacity is typically utilized for people who already have cancer and they're in line for surgery or something. So maybe your access is even less. And the thing about remote areas of the country where they just aren't near like a medical center that would have this kind of equipment. So getting a blood-based test, anywhere that you can draw blood and where that blood can be shipped off to our lab, you get this test done. And so I think it's the great democratizer. It really democratizes access to cutting edge life-saving testing. And I truly believe that's a human right. I mean, why should some people who, have access be able to detect cancer at stage 1, whereas everyone else is kind of relegated to late stage diagnosis? That doesn't seem right to me. So we're doing our parts. The very start, our view was the test has to be simple to administer. It's almost one blood draw. It's not this very complicated blood draw. It's very simple, standard that phlebotomists would be able to do at any, center where you have your blood drawn. It has to be low cost so that the healthcare system can afford the test. And so our test at scale, it's, a few $100s is what we market it for. It has to be a lot less than that. And so the technology we developed was all about how do we make the process as simple as possible? How do we make the processing of this sample as simple as possible? So our kind of wet lab procedures are streamlined, and that all leads to a test that is affordable, accessible, as simple as just drawing blood to be able to get a life-saving result. And our test result comes back within 2 weeks. So your doctor and you would know, within 2 weeks whether you have an elevated risk and you should definitely get a scan, or whether, you just check the box and you come back next year.
Absolutely. So I think it meets all the accessibility criteria: affordability, ease of access, convenience, and the speed. So I think it's a great innovation. Susan, how do you balance innovation with affordability? And what hard decisions does that involve as a CEO?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking at everything we do through the lens of we have to keep it simple. Let's put the complexity and the magic in the algorithms, which
Yeah.
cost us a lot less than workflows in the wet lab, what we're doing with the sample, running different assays. And so as we've innovated on the test and added more to it, it's typically been the burden on the algorithms. And the great thing is that we've funded 3 major clinical trials. We have these samples that we can go back and retrain our algorithms on. We have samples coming to us from all of the other studies we've done, commercial samples that, are coming to us from healthcare systems, and we retain all of the data because we're not just, filtering the data that's coming from the biology through an assay and looking only at certain points of the cell-free DNA genome. We're looking at the entirety of it. And so we naturally lead to this test that can be made better and better with more training data, with more sophisticated algorithms. And so that's been our approach. Our approach is, don't throw more complexity at it, throw more sophisticated machine learning and AI.
Susan, you stepped into the CEO role at a time when Delphi was on the verge of major breakthroughs. What were the fears and hopes that came with that responsibility?
Well, I mean, I think one of the fears always is, can you hire the right people to do the task ahead? Because what we're doing is absolutely breakthrough. It's not for the faint of heart, but
Yes.
the vision, the dream of being able to detect, initially lung cancer in a simple blood draw is, it's a big, bold dream. And we've started out as a small company, a private company with great investors who really believe in this. And so to fund major clinical trials and then to kind of get to the point where you're reading out a first trial, which we did at the end of last year, we read out a trial in Europe among 7,500 patients. They were asymptomatic, so no sign they had lung cancer. To be able to detect out with high sensitivity the early stage, cancers that were found was, that was such a breath of relief and a huge milestone for the team and I, and gave us, gave us the inspiration and the wind behind our sails to get to our next trial. Our next trial is a FDA trial that we're going to use for submission of our IBD to the FDA, and that will read out in the first half of next year. And it's a big trial. It's like, the biggest lung cancer trial like it, 12,000 patients. And they're now 2-year follow-up. So we've been tracking these patients for 2 years to see if cancer emerges. By the way, our test is an annual test, but FDA likes to track patients for 2 years. So we'll, it will be a really meaningful clinical trial for the
Mm,
entire industry, for the entire community and patient base that could be at risk for lung cancer. So we're really excited to get there.
right. I think what I admire most about your story, Susan, is how you've carried the weight of both scientific integrity and commercial responsibility and still stayed grounded in the human outcome. And that's rare. It's a reminder that leadership isn't just about vision, it's about values. What's something that you've learned about leadership in biotech that no MBA or boardroom could have prepared you for?
I think biotech is a, particularly rewarding and also particularly challenging place to be a leader. And with that trade-off, I would always like choose going for the really hard thing that is
Yeah.
incredibly rewarding and, kind of getting a team inspired to bring them along and doing the hard work. And by rewarding, I mean, I just can't imagine a mission that would be more compelling than, finding cancer early, using kind of blood-based testing and find cancer early where, patients have much better outcomes and to do that in a way that's accessible to everyone. So that I think is, that's about as inspiring as it gets. Our test, when adopted at scale, can save, 5 to 10,000 lives a year in the US alone. Our test is globally applicable, but in the US alone, think about what else can you do that can save 10,000 lives a year? And so that, it's a big motivator for our employee base. And then, it's not easy. I mentioned a small company to raise the money to do clinical trials, to develop
Yeah.
this technology, to hold a high bar of evidence and proof that our technology works in a true patient population, to do that while serving customers and really listening to them. And, our customers are healthcare systems. It's the heads of primary care, the heads of healthcare, the healthcare system, the CFOs, the people responsible for population screening, all the key people in these institutions who are believers, who really want to see us move the needle on screening rates, and then ultimately our customers are patients and giving
Yes.
them an answer that could save their life. And we take that very seriously. We think about every sample going through our lab as if it were a family member, and how would we want to to that data to be treated, that sample to be treated. And so it's a particularly difficult leadership challenge. It's everything from like raising money and funding, running
Mhm.
clinical trials, helping the right stakeholders kind of get behind us and be aware. I'm really proud to be one of the leaders at the CEOs Against Cancer for the American Cancer Society group in Southern California. And so I think it's all these things. And at the end of the day, the most important thing is the employees. These are the people
Yes.
with the skills, the talent, the dedication to make it happen, to develop technology, demonstrate it, run the samples, and get us to a point where we have an idea.
And Susan, do you lead more with data or intuition? And how do you know when to trust one over the other?
Well, I think that's dependent a bit on the situation. When it comes to a clinical trial, it's definitely the data has to speak, and the patient data is critical. We treat that with the highest bar of integrity. When it comes to business decisions and decisions about technology and how to focus ourselves, I guess over a few decades I've developed a lot of intuition. I think that it's challenging for teams to not have leadership be clear and decisive and decision oriented. I think teams don't do well in ambiguity. So I'm always careful about. I ask for data. I ask for clear data, and sometimes I want to see more analysis. But ultimately, it often comes down to judgment call. I'm fortunate to have a lot of experience under my belt, but also to have hired a C-suite. I hired a CFO and a CCO and a CTO since I joined the company, and they're just absolutely top-notch professionals. They're experts in their area. I think as a team, bringing together that subject matter expertise into kind of a whole view of what should we do for the company? How do we make decisions that are the best to make sure that our test sees the light of day and can impact patients and can impact more patients? And so, we're pretty good about bringing all the relevant data to the table, not getting into analysis paralysis, and at the end of the day, I'm pretty good at being decisive.
Right. Susan, so much of what you do is about detecting the invisible, what people can't feel yet, but what could save their lives. How has this work changed the way you see time, health, and the people you love?
Yeah, I think that I see that the most important thing that you can give an individual is their health, is to give them peace of mind. We all know we don't think about it much until something terrible is diagnosed, and then it sends, it doesn't just impact the individual, it's the entire family, it's the entire community. And you started the podcast saying that, we're all we've all been victims of friends, family who have been
Yes.
diagnosed with something that took their life way too soon. So I think it gives me great perspective on that. I think, any day might not be a win, but like overall, I feel like that we're winning and, we're making an absolute difference in everything that we ask our employees to do and our friends and partners to do. It's about making sure that we can make the impact that our technology has the capability to do. So it gives me great inspiration. It gives me great dedication to what we do. I think I talk about this so much at home that, in
Right.
my free time about how I'm just more optimistic about medicine and precision medicine and healthcare, despite what's going on kind of in the noise of changes to healthcare and what's going to happen and politics of it all. I think from a technology and a science standpoint and the people that I work with every day, including the physicians who are now like using our test in practice, I am so inspired. I'm so inspired that two of my children, my oldest two, are in medical school. They were so
Wow.
inspired by the fact that medicine is going to have a new wave of innovation based on molecular diagnostics like this,
Yes.
that patient care is going to be better than it ever was. The AI is going to be a tool to assist physicians to have the data they need at their fingertips. And so I think we're going to have a whole new wave of physicians who grew up with AI and who grew up with access to information and who grew up with bioinformatics and all the things that kind of go into the next generation of medicine. And that's super inspiring to me. And so I see it comes together in all aspects of my life, my career journey that's led here, my own children who are like deciding to
Yes.
pursue it. My third is, going to college, and, he's a senior this year, so he'll be applying to colleges, and he wants to study science. Maybe not medicine, but he wants to
Wow.
study science, and so I see it coming together in the next generation. I'm the biggest proponent in my family, as part of the CEOs Against Cancer, in my community, of people getting screened early. It all comes down to getting screened early. And so I feel like all my worlds collide into trying to really use this as a platform to make a difference.
Right. And my next question is somewhat philosophical and hypothetical at the same time. If one day Delphi's blood test helps save 1 million lives, but nobody remembers your name, would that still feel like success?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I will always feel the pride of the work that we've done, of the impact that we're going to have on lives. It doesn't, I think it will go on for generations. So there'll be many names associated with it. I feel passionate, inspired every day that we do this work because of the long ranging impact it's going to have on people, on families, on communities. And as I mentioned, starting with my own, if my kids were inspired by it, then that's enough for me in terms of name recognition. That's all I can ask.
Yeah, although we all know that that's never going to happen. I think what you've created is absolutely remarkable and legendary. and it's going to stay forever.
Mhm. I sure hope so.
Susan, what does fulfillment look like to you now? And has that definition changed over the course of your career?
Yeah, I think like most people, like, earlier in your career, you're always thinking about what's next and how can I get to a place where I can make a bigger impact and have bigger decision making authority, and so I think you spent your early part of your career getting the training necessary to continue to make bigger decisions and have bigger voice. And so that was great. I enjoyed every step of that, and I really felt like it was useful to do so many different jobs, even at Illumina, to doing the kind of both the product development leader as well as the chief commercial officer. But ultimately, I think that my view of career is being inspired by what you do, being able to come decades later and still having the passion and the motivation,
Yes.
every day that you had, early in your career, and to really feel proud of being part of something. And I kind of see myself as a steward of this great technology. There'll be generations of it to come, but as a steward to getting it from here to the next place where the next person can take it up and get it to even bigger scale. We believe these tests, they're not just for the US, they're global. They can have global impact. Certainly the cost structure and the simplicity of our tests can go anywhere in the world. And so I would love to see generations of this that impact kind of global healthcare. And that would be super rewarding.
Right. And Susan, before we end our today's conversation, is there a final message that you would like to leave our audience with?
Yeah, I think that I would want to leave them with a message of optimism. I think there's a lot going on in this world right now to feel, concerned about. Uh, there's a sense of kind of unease and uncertainty. But I think when it comes to the progress that we've made in helping patients detect cancer early, living longer lives, not having cancer be seen as a death sentence. We've come such a long way. And the core technologies that, many people have worked on to kind of get to this place this should be an inspiration for everyone. And I think, the future of precision medicine is going to lead to better, not just better, longer lives, but also more kind of healthy and rewarding and useful kind of lives that people, will enjoy seeing their families grow up and their grandkids kind of get married and all the things that we'd like to give back to people, give back to societies. I'm a huge optimist about this, so that's I think that's what I would want to leave with everyone. And I think get informed, like get out there, read up on technology, don't be scared of AI. I think it's going to make most things better and put in the hands of people, responsible people, use it for good. I certainly see us as that.
Right.
And yeah, kind of get informed and be part of the revolution, not just kind of riding along.
Well, that's a wonderful piece of advice. And that brings us to the end of our today's conversation, Susan. And when I think back on this conversation, I'm struck by something that goes beyond science, beyond technology, beyond titles. What we heard today wasn't just about liquid biopsies or fragmentomics, it was about the urgency of innovation, the responsibility of leadership, and the possibility of a world where cancer doesn't wait until it's too late. Susan, thank you very much, not just for your time, but for your clarity, your courage, and your unwavering commitment to putting people before systems. Your work reminds us that behind every test, every trial, every data point, there's a human life, a story, a future that might be saved. And for those listening, I hope you walk away with this conversation not only with knowledge, but with a renewed sense of urgency and optimism. Because the future of healthcare doesn't just belong to scientists, it belongs to all of us as patients, loved ones, decision makers, and believers in something better. Until next time, I'm Kaushik Trivedi, and this has been Drug Diaries. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Kaushik. Pleasure.